Welcome everyone on this new episode of Let's Talk AI. I'm super happy to be with Tobias Zwingmann. Tobias, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you, Tuma. How
I'm
are
super
you?
excited I'm very good also, and super excited to have you on the show. Just a quick reminder to everyone who is listening: this podcast is for anyone who seeks to be a better data professional, AI professional, and we want to get a 360 vision of the field by sharing with experts and learning from experts. And today we're with Tobias. I have many questions, like always, but Tobias, maybe for the people who might not know you, could you maybe do a brief introductions of who you are?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for the kind introduction and invite here to the show. So yes, I'm Tobias. I'm based in Hanover in Germany. I'm the managing partner of Rapid AI. Rapid AI is a B2B AI agency. So we help companies adopt AI and machine learning solutions faster, especially small and medium-sized companies. And otherwise, I'm also an author. So last year, I wrote the book AI-Powered Business Intelligence, which was published by O'Reilly. And I'm also publishing a lot and writing a lot on social media. So you can find me on LinkedIn and sharing a lot of these things that I learn that I do. And so that's what I do.
Very impressive. And to anyone who just research on LinkedIn, I mean, there is a lot to get lost in a way that you have books, you publish, and you do a very interesting work. But we're going to go into all of that. I always like to ask at the beginning, what are you trying to achieve today? Either it's as an author or with your company. What are you seeking, or what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like overall, I just try to, get more people into the space of AI in general, to help them achieve their goals. That might be company growth, that might also be personal development, that might be just, just for fun. I think in the end, there will be people who know how to utilize AI and AI services and those who don't, like very similar to people who like know how to navigate the internet and not like even today, like, there are some people who kind of say, oh, all that tech and digital stuff, like especially here in Germany, like we have those people saying that, and sometimes it feels like it's something that makes them special, but I think it's not really, what should make it special. I think now is the time to dabble around with that technology and see what the value could be for you. So yeah, I think that's my overall goal in the end, right? And to help people make that faster and easier, and get this adoption nicely.
Awesome. That sounds. Uh, I could like there are many questions that comes into my mind regarding how to do this. And you mentioned having fun. That's something interesting. Like coaching, also you mentioned, but we can discuss it afterwards. Um, could you maybe share with us a little bit a retrospective your uh, on your studies and career, so that we kind of like with the key moments, so that we maybe it can help some people out there seeking for what they should do, what could be their next steps, and so having an idea of what you've been doing
Mm.
since you've been doing it.
Yeah, sure. So I think to get the full picture, I need to really go like far back in time. Like, back in school, I was always kind of like a bit of a, techie. I mean, like back when I was in school, I created my first website, sold the first websites. I was in that, space when like all the kind of internet stuff grew up. And like, I just like found that all interesting and, was very like, active in that sense. And like it almost happened that I went to like going to study like informatics, after school. But then I, somehow found out that, what, maybe you shouldn't do something else in your life except being just technical the whole time. And then I actually, opted for a bachelor program in business administration. So, that was actually when I first got into, business administration. And I got a job in the exhibition industry. So I worked in the exhibition industry on different projects. And after I did that for a couple of years and also like working in different functions, like also marketing, sales, project management, and so on, I felt like, okay, it's time to get back on the technical track because like I saw all these happenings, especially in the data space,
Hmm.
back then. It was about 2014 or so, I guess. Yeah. And then I decided to do a master degree in IT management, to become a little bit more technical. And then actually, by accident, I stumbled across a programming language called R. And finally, this was actually the programming language which helped me like land the first data science job, because there was a job opening, looking for someone who knew some things about marketing and customer analytics, but also R. And back then, this kind of like opened the door for me to transition in my first data science role. And yeah, it just happened to be like, that I turned out to be a data scientist in a company that I would say is, yeah, maybe was a little bit very early for that whole data science thing. So, I was right in the first hype wave of that whole data science thing. And and then after that, I, gradually transitioned more into like the AI machine learning space, just like being where I am now, like, having my own company and writing a lot about these things, but also doing these things. But I mean, that's how it developed, right? So I wouldn't say that, there was a big master plan or so behind that. It kind of just happened, and now here we are. So, but yeah, really, I really appreciate this whole journey, and where we are today here.
Awesome. I like this. It kind of just happened. I like the idea of. I mean, we always talk about career, but most of the time when we ask people, their career it's just a chain of decisions, but it wasn't really planned. Do you want to comment something on that?
Yeah, I think there's this concept. I think it's not only in career, but also generally in life and in business. You have to kind of increase your luck surface area, and that's kind of true. So you want to, I don't say you don't need to do like everything, but at least you have to be in a position where you're open so that opportunities can actually reach you.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, the job offer that I got for data scientist would not have happened without like knowing R, and that was kind of like an accident. But on the other hand, like doing this IT management program where like these programming languages were on the curriculum, there was a deliberate decision to make, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's just like waiting there and waiting for good things to happen, but also just giving some options that these things can actually happen. And I think like especially in business that's true, right? I mean, like the whole business world is such a random process, honestly. Like everyone wants to make you believe that we need all this planning, and if you do this and this, you will exactly get this outcome. But that's just not true, right? You can do all the playbooks, but in the end just like completely end up in a different spot. So there's just so much random, and so many stochastic elements involved that you need to just be able to adapt that. And I think have a mindset where you just collect these or just try to increase this luck surface area. So that's one principle I truly believe in. And
That's awesome.
even coming from a data science background, right? So I think especially then, like we need to, especially when we deal with people and use cases that involve people, like we just really have to recognize that like we can build the fanciest models and the fanciest predictions, but like the bottom line impact we will have in the end, it just there's so many factors involved, that have nothing to do with the tech or with the algorithm or with the data even. So we can always try to like give the best shot, but like we can't really plan everything out, up to the end. That's just how it is, I guess.
Right. Right. I have two questions in my mind. I have, you mentioned marketing and sales. You mentioned that you've been around um, different fields. I mean, you have a tech profile, but you've been playing around with a lot of things. And you mentioned also that business-wise, you kind of have your unique way to do things. So first of all, my question is, how did marketing and sales, working in marketing and working in sales, either it's with air or other tech or anything you had to do with related projects, but how did those experiences impacted your vision towards you making decisions in your career and in how you see tech in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the first thing, the first component, like when you're in the sales and marketing space, I think there's this one concept of empathy, which you just need to like really understand in order to like sell things to people and to create products that are that meet people's needs. Because in the end, it's all about empathy, right? You have to anticipate what other people want, what customers' needs are. Because again, like the business playbook would be, okay, do some customer interviews, just ask them what they want. But it's not that easy, actually. Like customers will just tell you a bunch of stuff that they want, but that's not like ultimately the thing that you're going to buy, that they are going to buy from you. So yeah, I think that's this concept of empathy. And like the other thing is really the concept of like randomness and like like predictability involved, especially if you do data science use cases that involve like human behavior. I think it's I think it's pretty hard to do that in many cases. Like like you either need really a lot of data or really need a lot of like robust patterns in order to do that.
Mm.
And I think especially in the B2B space, that can save you a little bit if you do, like, for example, I did this use case on churn prediction. And actually, we did not do churn prediction for individual customers, but for like accounts, right? Like, for businesses. And that was
Mm-hmm.
much easier to do than to predict, something for people. So to give you a concrete
Mm-hmm.
example, I mean, I worked in the exhibition industry. And if you are an exhibition organizer, you have two types of clients. The first clients is, exhibitors coming to your show. Like, these are the B2B relationship, and otherwise
Mm-hmm.
you also have visitors coming to your show. And we found it
Right.
much easier, like, to model all the, things and relationships to on the B2B side to exhibitors compared to like, like those people, like, B2C or, like physically people walking to the exhibitions. They were pretty hard to model in terms of like forecasting, ticket sales or attendees. So that was pretty hard to do. On the other hand, figuring out what customers or what companies are not going to attend the next show, that was pretty easy to do, actually, given all the data
Mm-hmm.
that we had.
Mm-hmm.
So and this was also kind of like eye-opening for me, that like you have to be aware of like what you're actually modeling in the end. And the
Mm.
more kind of like people stuff is involved, I think the harder it gets really to make really good predictions and build predictive models. And I think that's why, especially in B2C cases, like all those huge data science use cases like we have seen are in setups where we have like insane amounts of data, like like think of like Netflix and Spotify categories, like where you really have so many data points that you actually have those reliable patterns that you can utilize. But especially for smaller and medium-sized businesses, I think that's really hard to do, honestly. So
Hmm.
yeah, that was kind of a realization I had. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the impression I got over the years. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it also seems that some of the times we try to do very complex use cases that could have a high impact, but is very difficult just because of the data, let's say. And there is another use cases like you mentioned that is aside that have the same level of impact, but is way easier to do. And I feel like this is like prioritization of use cases can be a very key element towards building value, I guess, even if it's like depending if it's marketing, sales, independently. How do you like? All right, I'm going to ask that afterwards, but I want to come back on the business part. So you mentioned two things that I like. You mentioned for one to increase, I couldn't restate exactly your words, but basically increase your luck, increase make somehow that you have a larger platform for your luck. And secondly, you mentioned that in business I mean, it never goes as planned, and you always have to improvise and while you go through it. So my question to you is, how do you go about business, about making decisions, taking into account the luck aspect, and what you've been learning through the industries in a business perspective, from a business
Yeah,
perspective.
sure. So, in short answer would be always go for quick wins. That would be the short answer. But to provide a little bit more context, like the way I approach, like for example, AI projects, when we work together with clients who want to like build their first AI project.
Hmm.
Obviously, the first phase always contains a workshop, something we do where we just map out AI opportunities from a high level, like what are current pain points, where do we think AI could help them, how could use cases look like, and then typically in the next stage you do some rough estimation for value and expected value and feasibility. And then, of course, you have those use cases where these are your champions. They have like high value and high feasibility. But then you also have use cases where maybe the value is not so high, but the feasibility is maybe even higher. And then, of course, like you have all those use cases where the feasibility is not so high. Maybe the potential value would be really high, but the feasibility is really low. So
Hmm.
these are more kind of like these research cases. And honestly, like before, I would have like if you have asked me that question like 2 years ago, so I would have always said like you need something like a mix, of categories in order to be successful. And
Hmm.
meanwhile, especially with all the developments in AI, like I would almost all the time go for low-hanging fruits and go for whatever is most feasible, even if the value is not as high as expected, for two reasons. First reason is maybe the value will be even higher than it is expected. Maybe it will be lower, but in some cases, like what we have seen is that once you implement something and you learn and you have this like iterative mindset, something we can talk about later on, maybe because that's very important. Like, people figure out that they say, okay, if we can do this, then we could also do that. Or maybe like once we have this data set, okay, can't we do this or that, right? All these things happen and all these ideas are coming up once you like make your first walks in the AI space. So that's why I would always go for the, just get the first win and see, what you can do. And the other thing is that, like this whole space of AI is like evolving so fast that like making a decision to hire people and commit to build an AI solution for like a year or so, I mean, that's a super risky business decision right now. There is some companies in this world, like, like they need to do that because AI is just so strategically relevant for them. But I would argue that for the average like bread and butter business, that maybe has a team of less than, I don't know, 10 engineers, maybe not even a single engineer in their company. Like it wouldn't be really a wise decision to like, hire people and go for these long-term AI projects because maybe you build that, I mean, imagine all those companies like trying to have, having built all these, fancy NLP systems. And then, there was GPT 3.5 and now GPT 4. And at some point there will be GPT 5. So, I mean, what do you do with that? Like, there's a whole field of like, computer linguists and NLP experts who suddenly, just stand on the side of the field and saying, hey, we were working on that actually, for the past 10 years, right? It's just solved, and especially for so many cases like, sentiment analysis or text classification. I know like LLMs don't work perfect, but at least out of the box, they provide so much value compared to like all the other solutions, which are also imperfect to some degree. So, that's why I would say, really think twice if you want to make that high AI investment upfront, and rather, I think this is more like a cultural issue, rather adopt that mindset of saying, okay, we want to ship something for the sake of learning something. Like the goal is not to have the first big bang and big hit with AI, but the first goal should be, of course, to provide value, but also to learn something, like to get some feedback, to like see how this technology works, to see what you can do, to see where it breaks. And if you have those low-hanging fruit use cases and if you identify them, I think there are plenty, especially in the realms of sales, marketing, customer support. There are so many things you can get started with. And once you have your first, like, couple of AI projects through the door and up and running, I mean, first of all, you're now a company using AI, so congrats to that. And secondly, maybe you have some more like creativity now, what you can do, and also like have the competence of, making that decision. So that's why I would right now, always more favor these kind of like, the more feasible, okay, let's do this use case, and then let's worry about all the other things later on. It depends, of course, from case to case, but that's my general approach right now.
Yeah, makes sense. I really like it. I'll ask you afterwards, like, how do you go about from use cases to implementation? And maybe we can discuss also about infrastructure, about what clients want versus what they have. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe they shouldn't start there. Maybe some pitfalls that you've seen through the time. But just before that, I just want to talk to the author.
Yeah,
so so you've been writing, correct me if I say wrong, but your book is AI powered business intelligence.
Correct.
And so why did you start this book, and maybe what are like the main reasons someone should read this book? Like if you have some insights from the book, some learnings, maybe you can share a bit about the process of writing for you, because you also write a lot on LinkedIn. You share about the latest technology, but also some personal statements, vision, etc. So can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, so like one of the main goals or drivers for this book was that I wanted to, and this is getting a bit technical maybe now, but I wanted to bridge the gap between data science teams and business intelligence teams and organizations, because especially like, from what I've seen is that like there are a lot of companies who have invested into data analytics like for the past decade, right? They have built their dashboards, some of the analytics department, like their BI with Tableau or Power BI, right? All these things. But so they did that, and then suddenly again, like 10 years ago, like there was this kind of data science hype wave. So now they had all these, BI people, very often located in their IT teams or, on the technical side of the business. And then, suddenly the business started to hire data scientists, right? So you had people like me, for example, right, like working in the like marketing department, for example, as a data scientist, trying to build like fancy AI use cases or ML use cases. And so there was the first disconnect between those two teams. And I thought the whole time, okay, what we need actually, is more bridge between those two, those two teams, because right now we are at the stage where a lot of those data science techniques or, tools have become so commoditized that I argue the kind of like average BI person or BI engineer is actually like, easily able to pick these up and to implement that into their dashboards. And this could involve, things like, making better predictions or making better forecasts of using, for example, an AutoML model, which you can pretty easily set up if you know the data, if you know what you're doing. That's not rocket science anymore. So you can do that and integrate that in your BI tool. Some of these BI tools, just provide that out of the box. Or you can use tools like, these natural language interfaces where you have the Q&A. And again, like these are tools and functions that are very often like integrated in the BI setup. And what I've seen is that a lot of BI people just don't do that because they don't see that as part of their kind of like, I don't know, skill set or competence or responsibility, because they think that's data science stuff, right? So let's do that, let's leave that to the data scientists. But then if you ask the data scientists, they actually say okay, right, you know what, like we actually know what kind of model to use, right? Either use an XGBoost or you see what model comes out of an AutoML process. But what we need to figure out is what's the data about, like what is the data quality and all these things. So, and who do they ask about the data quality? Well, the BI people, right? I mean, they have been working on this data for the past decade. So, and if they don't know, you go to the business and figure all these things out. But like bottom line is that I thought like you can have so much value inside this BI organization without hiring a bunch of data scientists doing all that, just by trying to upskill the existing people that you have and just opening that data science world to them. And I mean, just to mention two examples, right? So NLP for Q&A interfaces, AutoML for predictions, but there's also stuff like unlocking unstructured data, so processing documents and images. And there's tons of services out there that can process documents for you, and they actually work pretty well out of the box. So I mean, why not, analyze customer feedback inside your BI, right? It's just like, you don't have to build everything by yourself, but I think you have to show people what's possible and also, show them how they can potentially build a first prototype by themselves in order to, after that, move on to the next stage and see how to implement that. And of course, that's a completely different game. But still, right now, they have like identified opportunities for them. And that was the main intention for this book, actually, to just help people overcome this gap.
Awesome. You at the beginning you mentioned coaching. You mentioned coaching. So I think I'm going to ask you about that. But right after what you mentioned, I was thinking about bridging the gaps. I feel like this is a problem not necessarily in the tech field. I think it is a problem that is constantly trying to be solved as a human species, bridging the gaps between people so that we can understand each other better and build faster and better. So my question to you, based on your experience, your book, and the companies you've been working with, what are the main problems you can see people struggle with in companies in terms of not having these bridges between departments?
Yeah. So, I think one of the main problems is that people choose the wrong tools for the wrong job. And to give you an example, if you want to get started with like AI or data or ML, I think the best option is not to build a task force for this. Honestly, I think the best option at this stage is to just go alone. Right. So I think there's this quote by, I don't know, I think it was Michael Jordan or so, who said, like, if you want to go fast, you need to go fast alone. If you want to go far, you need to go together, something like that. And I think this also relates back to technology, because you can't just build a prototype and invite people from regulatory and people from the data department and from IT and from the business and 5 consultants and do all this. It just doesn't work, right? It's just too slow. Like, you can't iterate over that. So you need to acquire, there needs to be someone in the organization who needs to kind of acquire a little bit of a generalist mindset and also technical skills in order to build something. And in the BI space, for me it was the BI engineers, but in other spaces you have people like like marketing specialists who can do something like that, or it depends on the domain really. But I think there needs to be some like people who can do a lot of things on their own and just like prototype and move fast and fail fast, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think you have to acknowledge that like once you leave that kind of prototyping space, like it's a completely different game, right? You can't do that alone, right? From
Yeah.
now on, you need to kind of like more or less like break down whatever you had built up right now, and just to
Hmm.
reconsider. Okay, how, like the main goal of the prototype or whatever you did was to minimize risk. Like you wanted to minimize risk of project failure. You wanted to figure out if the
Right.
value is there, if the feasibility is there. And once you have that, you said, okay, good. Now I have proven that I have the value, that people actually care about that. People want this. Now let's figure out how we make this happen. And then you actually, like in my book, I talk about that with the, two pizza rule, where I say that the prototype team should be like fed by maximum two pizzas, so like a lot more than 3 or 4 people, like depending on how much you eat. But then on the production team, like you order the whole big buffet, right? You have all the people sitting there, and this is just like just a corporate project or company project going on. But right now at this stage, that like the potential for value acquisition at the end is much higher
Hmm.
because you already validated that at the beginning. And I mean, this translates literally to so many examples in life, even to like posting stuff on, on online, or writing stuff like, or even writing a book. So probably, before you start like writing a whole book on something, it
Right.
might be just easier to validate the core ideas of the book by posting on that on social media and see if, it just works, right? So, and if you see that, some ideas work, then it might be worth like going deeper and investing more time writing a blog post or writing a newsletter or writing a book, right? After you validated that. But you would not sit down and look out of the window and say, okay, what could I write about tomorrow? Okay, maybe I write about this. And then you just start writing the book, right? I mean, it could happen, to be like very successful. But at the same time, yeah, that's not in line with the concept of increasing the luck surface area, because you want to like
Right.
try out all these different things until you figure out, okay, this is something that could actually work, and then you want to go into that and try to build it up. And
Right.
yeah, so, and especially with AI and machine learning, I think this is so true, because like you have so many variables in this whole game, that are like people don't know how this works. People don't know if they have the data. They don't know the technology. They don't know what people they need. Like they don't know anything at the beginning. So, the best way to figure it out is just start really, really small, and ideally in a very small team, and just figure out like how far you get and like what kind of value do you achieve. And yeah, I think like this mindset is not really for everyone, like especially for larger corporations. Like they need to have their 5-year plan, and they need to know what kind of revenue to expect from AI
Hmm.
in 4 years and so on. So this agile approach doesn't really get you there. But on the other hand side, I think especially for smaller businesses that can move in a like faster way, I think that's a great opportunity here, and just see how far they can get, right? If they just
Hmm.
allow some like creativity and some kind of new approaches inside the company.
Right. And I feel like innovation is more than ever important based on the. I like to consider that LLMs, and this is not from me. I don't want to take credit of anything about what I'm going to say, but I like this way of thinking. But I like to think that LLMs are not hallucinating; they're creative, and I like to use LLMs in strategic thinking. And sometimes it does a wonderful job to enrich my first thoughts or intuitions and find counterexamples, and it helps me on my own to go further into my reflections toward whatever I want to achieve or do. You mentioned something very interesting about like having a department. Maybe we could call it an agent, like a department that can be independent from all other departments and move fast and test things fast. And to me, with LLMs, with this new technology, I feel like companies need to innovate faster to stay competitive. I mean, of course, there are many counterexamples based on the industry and the size of the company and so on. But I believe that we have all the tools to iterate fast. You mentioned about iterating. We can discuss about agile method, iterating, and productivity on its own. But I'm aligned with with what you shared. I also thought while you were describing how to come up with, like, how am I going to write a book? All right, I'm just going to watch the window, but out of the window and just hope that I have a good idea and write about it and hope that people will read it. And what you mentioned is very interesting in a way that I just need to be consistent about trying things and have some kind of validation, measurement, feedbacks to see what's happening. And I feel that this is something that can really be helpful towards taking better decisions. And I believe that what you mentioned about it is very hard to just sit down and write a book. I feel like the only people who can do that are the ones that have already been testing multiple concepts and have a unique vision and want to put these concepts in a unique framework that haven't been seen before. And maybe in that case, it could apply. Um, I don't. I just wanted to share these thoughts with you. But before I ask you about rapid AI, you mentioned agile. You mentioned iterate. You mentioned, and I mentioned productivity. So, how do you go about delivering fast and delivering the right tools?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a broad question, but
Yes.
like it's yeah, how to move fast. So like one principle I go by is to just use what's there. This comes for technology, for like for example, for a prototype, I would always go with an external solution, maybe an external vendor that is doing that if the quality is just like acceptable enough to ship the prototype, because it's
Mm-hmm.
just faster, right? And
Mm-hmm.
also you don't get, and I think this is really important, you don't get as attached to the product as you do when you do it by yourself. Like, imagine, for example, let's take the chatbot example, right? Like there are tons of, chatbot frameworks out there that allow you to like build these rag architecture like chatbots. So you can also do that, like for example, if I use those kind of like techniques, like people ask me like, why don't you do that like by your own, just like 5 lines of code in LangChain? I'm like, yeah, dude, I could do that, but the thing is, like, if I invest that time building that, I kind of like get attached to the thing, right? It's like, I don't want to throw it away as easily as just like taking an API from a vendor and just like see how far we get with that, because we're still in the
Right.
prototyping stage and we want to fail fast. And the thing gets even worse, and that's I think the one problem I sometimes have with innovation departments, the more people are aligned or attached to it. So
Mm.
imagine like you have this great idea, right? And you have two options. Like you can either go by yourself and just see how far you can get this idea within a week, or you just have a team, right, of 3 people and say, okay, let's see how far we can get this idea. Just by rallying 3 people around this idea, you have already kind of implicitly set, a certain anchor of like keeping this idea alive for at least a couple of
Mhm.
days or maybe even months in a large company. Because
Mhm.
like if like otherwise, if you just kill this idea after a couple of days and you have now like invited 3 people to a Zoom meeting, you kind of like like just say that maybe the idea was not so good, which probably it wasn't, right? But like who wants to tell that, like the more people are involved in this whole process. So I think you need to do that like somehow like on your own. And that kind of like relates to the business setup. When you say, okay, I want to prototype or demonstrate a use case, you want to choose your setup in a way that you can easily throw it away. Like, you don't want to become like too attached to it, like be it on like dependency on other people, dependency on the work that you got in there. Like that's like sunk cost fallacy syndrome, right? Where you say, okay, now I spent like 10 hours working on that, or 10
Mhm.
days or 3 months, like I have to make this work. No, right? You have to just throw it away. And I think that's very hard for a lot of people to do, and that's why I'm really about trying to and that that's where the coaching aspect comes in, trying to get people who are maybe not like years or behind or so much behind the technology stack, but just maybe a little behind, and maybe they need a little training or a little guidance in order to like unlock these services, and unlock these tools that allow them to either build these things by themselves or to find a vendor that helps them build these things really fast, right? So I think this is kind of important, because a lot of people still think when they hear about AI, data scientists, data science, that they need these kind of experts, these data scientists, right? You need to
Mhm.
hire the first data scientist, and they need to work for 3 months, and then I mean, like when I started as a data scientist, I worked for 4 months on a prediction model that in the end no one used, because it was just not used in the company. And I'm like, okay, I mean, we could have just like taken any model and actually see how far we got, right? But that was not the mindset back then. The mindset back then was, okay, we have a project plan. And the project plan is like we develop the model for 3 months, then we put it into production, then we collect the feedback, then we do this and this and this. But like this and this never happened, so that was a problem. And yeah, I think this is how generally companies should generally adopt in that mindset, which they should adopt. It. Like it's yeah, I think it's coming from software development, but I'm always saying, like, you have software development, and all these agile principles, and so, but then you have data projects, which are like software projects plus X on uncertainty involved, right? So they are even more risky and more like uncertain to do, because probably you have never looked at the data before in many cases, and secondly, you don't really know what the data would look like 3 months from now. Like it's very hard to predict. So there is not only this whole like software component involved, but also the data component involved. That makes these projects very hard to predict, to control, to steer. And that's why I think you need to have this kind of very iterative setup to manage these projects.
I can really see the two levels. Like at the top we have like data observability with like all the pipelines, and like everything is like we get the data from the pipeline and it retests it, and the models are retrained if the conditions are matched, and like the super sophisticated thing. And then like almost everyone like trying to like get good data.
Yeah, exactly.
Pipelines. And it is very interesting. I'll ask you afterward maybe about some productivity tool that you have for yourself, also some experiences that you might have with clients that can be very interesting to share about. But before, can you share a bit more about Rapid AI and about what you are currently doing in the company?
Yeah, sure. So Rapid AI, again, it's like an boutique AI agency. So especially helping small and medium-sized companies to adopt their first, or one of their first AI use cases. So especially, non-technical businesses who have heard about AI, who want to get started with AI, but maybe who lack the resources or the knowledge to do so. And like the way, we position ourselves is that we say, like, we help you to build your first profitable AI use case in 8 weeks or less. And that obviously involves, tools more on the methodological side, like running AI design sprints, but also using these rapid prototyping techniques in order to deliver the first, prototype. So that's like what Rapid AI is doing. And like in many cases, of course, like we end up like building prototypes around like LLMs and chatbots and so on. But in many cases, like, always also ends up in, I would say, more like, operationally involved things like, improving analytics, improving dashboards, or trying just to figure out what could be good AI use cases in that company. And so that's what I do there.
That sounds very, very interesting. So regarding use cases, when you work with client, I really like that you have the fast impact, like in less than 8 weeks you have these things running. But what all right, so I think I have 2 questions here, but let's start with one, I guess. What are the common use cases that let me know if this is confidential or not, but like what are like important use cases that you've implemented that had a very big impact? And if so, if you can share a bit more about it, I think it could be very interesting if you could share a bit about the framework on how you go about implementing or building this proof of concept. Maybe let's talk afterwards about implementing it. But
yeah, sure. So, like talking about use cases, again, like I opt for like high feasibility, that add, some value, maybe not like super high value, but at least some value. And maybe to give you a concrete example. So recently we worked with that customer on a, customer support chatbot. And from the feedback that we got from another client was that we are able to, in a B2B setup, we were able to reduce the amount of first level customer support emails in this case, that go through the customer support stuff by 10 to 15%. All right, so that was like not a super high number, but it was a high number, or not a super high number, but it was a measurable impact. And imagine the setup of reducing first level customer support in a like corporate environment, like where you have like 50%, 15% less emails, but in a enterprise environment, you probably have a first level support team, right? So, there's like a group of people, like 20 people, 30 people, 100 people dealing with first level support. Like if you reduce the amount of first level support there by 15%, they're like, oh, nice, that's super helpful for us and so on. But still in the end, you have those, like 15 or 100 people there employed. Then for small and medium sized business on the other hand, what we found out is that very often, like people do first level customer support on top of their existing, stuff that they need to do. And whatever is taken away from the first level support, like, from that kind of process, I mean, they are super happy about it. Like, they totally love that even there's just 2 emails less coming in a day. I mean, they are super happy about it, because in the end, it's just a pain doing that, because they just need to do it like on top. And literally every incoming email that you reduce is directly impacting the business, because they don't have to deal with that. They can just focus on their business, because again, they are not like a customer support team, right? They maybe just do account management, or maybe they're on the operational sides of things, right? But just like these small little things add up. And that's, where we say, okay, just on paper, like this use case does not look really good. But if you just ask the end users about that, like they will be super happy about it, especially because they see the potential of building that up. Because maybe we can just right now reduce like 15% of the incoming support queries, because we don't have the data and the knowledge base for that. But maybe we can just like work on that data, and maybe just feed in more like historic emails, or anything that can help like get this to another level. Maybe we get to 30 or 50% less emails coming in, and that would be like a super high value use case for them. So that's the like kind of like reason why, right? And why I would go for this like kind of like even low impact use case on paper. And the other thing is like, how do we approach that? I mean, obviously, like, for the first prototype, I just use a like out of the box, chat-based solution to set it up. Like there are plenty of, vendors for that on the market. I don't want to, name anyone in particular, but there's just like enough of them available. But then when it comes into like integration, and also we need to be more like strict about like, privacy and data governance and so on. Like obviously, like there are ways to set this up pretty easily internally. And meanwhile, we have this kind of like, framework which you can just pull up in order to like connect it to external data sources, upload some like PDF documents, just like deploy the chatbot, for example, on an Azure environment, completely hosted inside Europe. But again, like even this would be too large for a prototype. Like for a prototype, I'm just like, okay, give me just some data. Like we just use one of those external vendors and just see how well, because we want to analyze how well a model like GPT-4, because that's the same model we will end up like using in the end. How well this model can actually handle your data and like the incoming queries, and just see where we are right now. If it makes sense to like go further, or if we say, okay, like we could probably like reduce 15%, but we would need like a full month on development on that in order to get it to an acceptable level.
Right.
So that's where I say like we need to like separate the prototyping phase from the actual like deployment or production environment.
No, I think it's very, very interesting, and I really like this example really showcase how problems are unique based on the lens of with which we're looking at it. I said it not in the best way I could, I guess, but I think everyone understood. So that's interesting. You mentioned you do this proof of concepts. You mentioned infrastructure. You mentioned keeping the data private. And you mentioned also the service about Azure, as of you can deploy this kind of models, this kind of, for example, GPT models, and you can deploy them in a private environment, which is very interesting. You can also use the open source models in whatever environment you want, such as Llama 2. My question is, when you have a use case and you have a metric that shows that this use case is useful and is saving money or time, which is money, to people in the company, do you go about the implementation, or is it the responsibility of the company, or how do you implement? Do you implement, and if so, do you like, how hard is it to implement in general, from a use case to matching the infrastructure and everything they have?
Yeah, honestly, it's hard. It's really super hard to do that. And like 1 year or so, I tried to get Rapid AI in a position to so that we could do that ourselves. But we like quickly figured out that like that's not going to happen. That's not really possible, at least at the scale we are running right now. I mean, if you're a large consulting company like Accenture, so like you probably have the resources to do that. But the problem is like depending on the kind of use case, you need a different tech stack, you need different experts, you need different like knowledge about like what the customer has. Like for example, if they have an SAP system that needs to be integrated, like kind of we're out, right? Like no
Yeah.
clue. So like meanwhile, the approach that I'm following is to like help customers get their first POC or proof of like prototype running, and then we just work together in order to get the first PRD, so the product requirement document, ready, for example, and to help figuring out is that something they need to build internally, that need to like buy from the market, just help them find the right vendor for that, and also for a certain period of time supporting them more in a you would call it a product management or product owner role for that for that
Mm-hmm.
piece of software, because like I have found out that like especially for like those non-technical and smaller companies, and I think like smaller companies for me, that's companies like less than 500 million revenue per year, right? And like for these companies, it's super hard to manage these software projects because
Mm-hmm.
A, like all the uncertainty around technology and so on, and B, resources. Like they don't have IT people sitting around waiting for labor. In fact, like most like traditional SMBs, they are facing a completely different challenge. Like I know a client, like their IT department will be just shrinking to like 30% of the current size over the next 10 years just because people are retiring, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they don't have people who can just like even if it's just about managing and like controlling vendor or managing vendors, like they don't have people do that. They just need to like hire people that can like keep all the systems running. So and we just try to take that work away from them and help them to figure out who could be a good partner for this, who could be like good vendor. Do you need to
Mm-hmm.
go with one of those like huge consulting companies? Is there a more specialized vendor for this and this? And just like trying to navigate the space and putting into this position. And like so far that works pretty well. Yeah, but let's see. I mean, this whole industry is always pivoting. But yeah, I think that so far it's like a pretty good pretty good approach, because that's what a lot of companies face right now, at least here in Germany and Europe, where a lot of companies are.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking about pivoting and speaking about tools, architectures, and so on, um, how do you go about learning new technologies, learning new concepts, and learning new principles? I understand that it is not necessarily to go back to any new programmation language and like be at the age, at the state of the art of like anything new, but everything new. But how do you go about improving and keeping keeping fresh, if I can say, if I can
Mm.
phrase it like that? how do you how do you stay fresh?
Yeah, I mean, the ideal answer would be, to just like, start building something, start building some hobby projects and side projects. But honestly, like recently, that has been really tough to do. Yeah, because like there's just so many other things around. I would definitely love to, do more, hands-on and building work right now. But for anyone who wants to like, stay ahead, I think that's just the best thing you can do, right? Just start playing around with technology. And like if you're more a technical person, that means just coding something up like by yourself. If you're less technical, you can use a no-code platform or no-code framework, to just dabble around with technology. So like, there's so many options you can do right now. I think there's nothing really preventing you from like doing that. And like if you're like even super non-technical at all, then I mean just use ChatGPT every day. Right? That's the easiest interface you have to work with AI. But yeah, for everything else, I do really love stuff online, especially on Twitter or X, and things that are happening there. I think it's still a pretty good platform to just see what's happening, what are new frameworks, what are new releases coming out. That's pretty good so far. And yeah, and otherwise, just seeing from like real implementations, right? When we have a concrete use case, like the other day, we were evaluating software for AI software for like the sales vertical for call transcripts, and I posted about that one tool the other day, where we just like stumbled across that tool like during that process because we had this like concrete requirement there.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like I think like in like normally I would approach it that way. They just try to get hands on with these tools, but also not try to force it too much. So I think a lot of companies have, and I think that's actually much better than like creating an innovation department or so. Like just give your employees like one day every 2 weeks, for some fun or free projects, like especially in the kind
Mm-hmm.
of developer space, because you need to free up people in order to like have them play around with things. And I think it's very important that you're able to play around, that it's not like goal oriented or like metric driven. You need to be able to just like just play around with it and see how it
Mm-hmm.
works. And once you have that flexibility, I think that's the best way to learn, and just see how these things actually work out.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. Also, speaking about pivoting, um, and now that we have your secrets to stay with how high skill values, either it's with no code or coding directly. How do you see the industry heading? I mean, I know this is a very, very, very hard question because, I mean, who expected LLMs? I don't. I mean,
Mhm.
some people. I guess maybe you are one of them, and you will correct me. But
Oh,
for a lot of
completely no,
people,
I
it
didn't
was.
expect that. Yeah, honestly, I
But
mean, in my book, like I wrote that last year in November. Like, there's no single mention of like GPT 3.5 in that book. I think I have one reference to kind of a generative AI, but it was just not there yet. Like, but 2 months
mhm,
later, there it was, right? So,
mhm.
yeah.
That is impressive. I think it surprised a lot of people in NLP. I think it
Mm.
gave a lot of existential crisis to some NLP experts.
Yeah,
but
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
I think it is very interesting, and I believe that if you're an NLP expert, you can always uh, go from there and build amazing things that no one can think of except NLP experts. So my question to you is, um, how do you see the based on your expertise and the use cases you've been seeing, where do you see AI going, and where do you see the most value out of use cases and implementing AI, either it's LLMs or just like predictable models, regressions,
Mhm.
classifications, and so on.
So I think the main trend, at least for the past 12 months, if not more, will be commoditization. And this goes back actually to like innovation theory. So in innovation theory, I actually don't know the exact concepts for the or exact terminology for that, but there's one concept which is called like disruptive innovation, which happens every once in a while, and like GPT-4 or 3.5 or ChatGPT for that sake was such a disruptive innovation. But then you have like incremental innovation, like which happens all the time. So you have incremental innovation, but then sometimes disruptive innovation happening. And we just had disruptive innovation here. So now it's all about like incremental innovation. And I think this incremental innovation will eventually come through commoditization in various smaller aspects. So we will see much more AI tools for certain niches, like, for like we have seen like ChatGPT tools for marketing and sales copywriting. Like there will be a ChatGPT tool for every aspect of every business function. Like, that's where all the VC capitals like, flowing into. So I expect a lot of commoditization. And again, that's why, I don't want to suggest like building too much and investing too much there myself, because like, there's tons of other people, just trying to do the same right now. And the other thing is that I think there will be just a handful of companies in this world who are really able to like build these very large foundational models, and unfortunately like they won't be sitting in Europe. I don't really see that happening. So like we will see like large companies in the US and in China building these large foundational models, and then literally everyone else in the world will be trying to like adapt, fine tune, or just tailor or customize these models to their own particular use case. And I think this will be the main like driving forces. So you on the one side you have commoditization, companies figuring out if they should buy this tool or not, and on the other hand side, fine tuning or customization of
Hmm.
existing foundational models, and then companies trying to like build their own stuff on top of that. I think this will be the two main drivers we're observing. But let's see.
Hmm.
Right, it's a very dynamic space.
Let's see. Let's say it goes. How far do you think prompt engineering can go with data observability? With like if you have very, 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 very detailed systems with a lot of numbers. In the short term, how I mean, short term, mid term, how far do you think prompt engineering can go? Can I tomorrow have my own company and and my employees are me prompting tools and them doing things. How far do you
Yeah.
think we are from this?
Yeah, like if you have asked me at the beginning of ChatGPT, I would have said we don't need prompt engineers, right? It's all designed to be like super intuitive and so on. But just like having worked in a couple of projects now, like there really is a difference on how you prompt these things, and also just having like observed how other people just use ChatGPT, and I'm like, you can't just ask it to do that, right? I mean, you can, but like there's like
Yeah,
nothing really good coming out of
don't
that, like
expect to. Yeah,
yeah, and people just get frustrated that it produces these mediocre outcomes. And when I see those people, coming up with these mega prompts, and I'm something like, okay, also this can't be the answer, right? That's the other extreme. So and yeah, so right now I think and honestly, I think every company should have a ChatGPT training for their employees, like not only like for prompting the model, but also for like what kind of data am I allowed to put in there? What are some use cases, and especially what are use cases for my business and for my company? So I think every company should have this. I think there's no point in just trying to block it and like prevent people from using it, because what people could do is they just send all the company details to their personal email and do it on their personal computer, mail it back to the company, and just, I mean, like, people will always find a way to get through these systems if they want to use it. So yeah, and I think in that sense I would not call it like prompt engineering, maybe more something like a, I don't know, LLM literacy or so. I don't know if that is good. Maybe that's even too far, right? But just a very like 101 crash course, on how to use these models and how to use them responsibly and what to do with the outputs and so on. I think honestly, I think every company should have that. And it doesn't have to be like a super complicated like 1 week training. Maybe just like 1 or 2 hours of video watching and that's it, right? And just after that trying. But like it's like I see so many companies not giving any guidance to their employees on this topic of ChatGPT. Some HR departments have added ChatGPT courses, where you go for 2 days and you pay 3,000 euros. And I'm like, what the fuck? What? That's not the idea of AI democratization, right? And I think that's not how it's supposed to work, right? But every company should have like a 1 or 2 hour training material on how to use these models responsibly, like adapted to their business and in their own language and everything. So yeah, that would be good.
hmm. When you say responsibly, what do you have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, putting data in there which should not be used in this. Some companies have their own, meanwhile, their own kind of internal GPT, so that could be a different story for this one. But also responsibly in terms of, for example, like, do you need a policy internally to like flag AI content that if someone was 100% generated by AI, do you need to like quote that or highlight that this is coming from an AI, or you don't need to? I don't know. That could be a company policy. But also just being aware of that it can make up, like, it's not a fact machine, right? Like it will just create stuff. So people need to fundamentally understand that this is a text prediction system. Like it's like fancy autocomplete on the steroids, but it's not a factual it's not a factual generator. And
Yeah.
just having this kind of like mindset, like this is really important, because in the end, like there's also ethical usage of these systems, right? You're not allowed to, or you shouldn't just take the outputs and present these as the truth, to
Hmm.
some external parties, that don't know that this is, actually LLM generated content.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. I feel like the best way to use those tools are, I mean, to my perspective, it's like having the blueprint of what do I want.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I have a problem, until I can create any more sub problems of my problems, like each step of my problem, then using ChatGPT is too soon or it won't be that good. But once I have the blueprint of what I want and I can separate very clearly the different tasks, then it does an amazing job. And that is for like text generation, but also for planning, thinking, strategy, and so on.
All
I
these
think that,
frameworks, like try to ask ChatGPT for going with you through the job to be done framework. I mean, that works like a charm, right? And like ChatGPT is aware of all these kind of like psychology and
yeah,
marketing and customer frameworks that exist out there, right? You can literally just ask it, do you know the following book, right? And just quote a book, and then you'll just say, okay, give me the most important like essay, like summaries of these book, or what frameworks are used. And then you can go from these frameworks. So I think
right,
there's so many opportunities that you can use
right.
these tools. Yeah. but either sometimes people just don't care, I don't know, or they don't know how to use that. But I mean, like, if you want to get started with AI in your company, then like having your employees like use ChatGPT in a like decent way, I think that's one of the easiest quick wins you can get, honestly. And
Yeah.
there are regulatory like concerns and privacy issues and so on, but like even these things are developing, right? Like you could either like build a clone or copy of that internally, or you could, for example, like use ChatGPT for enterprise. You could use another LLM. There's an LLM also trained in Germany. It's not that good as GPT 3.5, but still, I mean, there are options. So.
Hmm. Yeah, no, totally. Like just to add a few examples to what you
Mhm.
said, like for example, I have like I've been reading some books and I really liked the line where it was going. So I just took all the books, the latest book that I read. And like I have like maybe a business book, a tech book, a science book, and I have like this list. And then I put all into a prompt and I say, recommend me 10 books. And then from these 10 books, I have like great recommendations and I don't need to go on the internet and like check. I don't know how they do their list. That's one. The other one is a bit more low key, but I like to journal, like
Mhm.
uh, either it's every day or like I just ask myself specific questions, and I have in my Notion I have like many questions, and I just look at them and I see which one fits more or feels better like for today. So let's say like how can I be I don't know, I don't want to share too much about that,
Yeah.
but but like let's say I have like this goal question or this like being a better person or feeling better or whatever. um and so I just start answering and asking more questions to myself, and I was like I came up with like solution and specific actions towards like the question I'm asking myself, and then I'm like, but wait, what if there is more to that? So I just asked the question and I wrote five more things using ChatGPT that I will implement in my life, and that are good recommendations. And
Mm.
so I feel like as an assistant, either it's for like building a business, finding solutions, like if we're very specific about tasks and what we're trying to do, I think we can be very creative, and we need to still learn, and the learning curve using them on a daily basis as assistants um, can be very improved. I mean, I believe personally. Anyway,
100%.
that's just
Yeah,
me.
100%. Yeah, yeah. No, like same here. Like, every newsletter that I write, I put it into ChatGPT and ask it to criticize, the shit out of this newsletter and
Yeah.
just find
Hmm.
like weak spots in that. And this,
Yeah.
often just helps me to like find those blind spots where I said, okay, like that would be a good aspect to highlight, right? Of course, like, it will always suggest something because it's text completion, right? So at some
Hmm.
point you have to say, okay, no, it's
Yes.
actually fine the way it is. But still, like, I think it's good, right? For these kind
Hmm.
of use cases. There's so many examples in there. And the ones you mentioned, like, I absolutely love them. So they're great.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it doesn't make sense, like you can see it. I mean, like you
Yeah.
said, you can like don't take it and use it, because like you can see or you can check if what is there makes sense or not. And it is very good at making something seems real,
Yeah.
even if it's not
And,
facts, if
and
it's not.
also, I think the more you use these systems, the better you can kind of sense whether a text was generated using ChatGPT. Like, there are some, because there,
Yeah.
there was the other day, there was this Twitter thread of saying, like, if a text contains the word 12 too often, it's like probably created by ChatGPT because it has some bias for
Yeah.
this word. Let's delve into this concept, right? And but yeah, once you start working with these things, like, you realize that there's a certain, like, sound in it there,
Yes.
and once you pick up that sound, you will see, like, in so many articles and newsletters where you say, okay, like, I
Yeah.
know that this was ChatGPT generated, like,
Hmm.
or even comments on LinkedIn, where you just see some
Yes.
random comments and you just see, okay, that was just ChatGPT generation, right? You can just, like, there's no factual proof, but you just feel it, right? It just
Yeah.
feels so, yeah, yeah,
I think it's
ChatGPT is.
because also exactly. I think it's because also people are still trying to use them. I think that you can be enough, like you can be good enough in prompting as to not be that obvious. Let's say you just add as right as a human way, or you just add things that are
Yeah,
like too
definitely. Yeah,
ChatGPT way.
yeah.
But I think the most obvious thing on LinkedIn that I've seen is like the when you see two emojis. one after the other. When like there is multiple phrase with two emojis, that's
Yeah.
1000% ChatGPT.
Emoji
Yeah,
is a red flag, yeah, for
yeah.
ChatGPT.
Right now, I think it is not the best time to use too much emojis and to be very cautious about the
Yeah.
one we use because it is very ChatGPT
Mm.
ish
Yeah.
and the words you mentioned. So I have three last questions for you, Tobias, and I want to thank you again for this episode. I'm learning so much from you, and I hope everyone else out there is learning. We'll talk about your socials. How can people learn more from you, connect with you? But before that, do you have any tips regarding professionals, either they are at the beginning or more advanced in their career? I always like to help both of those profiles. Do you have any tips for data scientists, data engineers, data architects, AI engineers, and all data related jobs? Do you have some tips career wise?
Career wise, I would always go for teaching or mentoring to just for self progression. It's also like also kind of a selfish reason. Like the more you teach, the better you get at something. So whenever you have the chance to like teach a group of people or do mentoring, for example, I do online mentoring for a bootcamp called Springboard. They're always looking for mentors, so that's a good like just a good way to interact with people and help others who might be just following a similar career path as you. So yeah, that's something I would do. And yeah, just like if you are really just starting out, try to build stuff that you can show to other people. And when it comes to just selecting projects, and that's a lot of things that students in Springboard, like they need to create a capstone project and have some ideas of projects they can do. And I often give an advice which is kind of counterintuitive to what everyone says. In business school they say like don't go for solution that you just build for yourself, right? Don't assume that you are like the customer, like you're not, and stuff like that. But I'm like, what, you don't have any clue what works anyway, so just like solve something that helps your problem. So because worst case, you solved, you built a valuable solution for you, and also you're building something for these kind of like power users of something, assuming that you are that kind of power user of this thing.
Mhm.
And like if all things go south, at least you have one project that you build to help out yourself. And also it will be much easier for you to build a narrative around that, why you would need it and so on. For example, I built like, I mean, random story, I operated a couple of years back an affiliate website, affiliate store with Amazon affiliates. And so and I built that kind of like simple dashboard where I matched like tracking IDs to the parameters in the dashboard, so I could figure out like what website is converting which kind of traffic. It's like super niche and weird. Nobody would ever think to write a capstone project on that, but I'm like, that's actually a super useful use case, right? Everyone who is in the similar space knows exactly what it is and why you would need that, and everyone else is just like, okay, that's some pretty technical stuff, looks good. I don't understand the word, but that's fine. I see the whole point of it. So, and I think just using something that is like selfishly like not only fulfilling your own curiosity but also helping you address your own problem, like, and
Mhm.
just like, yeah, two benefits, right? You move ahead career wise because you just sharpen your skills, and also you solve a problem you currently have. So that's how I would approach it. But yeah. So,
Yeah, makes sense. Getting some things out there in our GitHub if we're more technical, and
yeah. And because like these projects will allow you to do so much of them, right? You can write a blog post on them, you can write social media posts,
yeah.
you can share that on GitHub, you can put that into a presentation, like, just in terms of like content, there are so many ways you can like, recycle that. You can talk about the failures that you made, you can talk about the success, you can talk about the tools that you use for that, you can record a video of you doing that, you can share, like I said, like the blog post, a step-by-step tutorial. Like, just from a single project you can probably create like 6 months of social media content pipeline if you're just starting out. And I think that's just a nice side effect.
Awesome, awesome. I see. I feel that sometimes people get like they go through their project and they just stop before like going into a cloud solution or like building the Docker image. And do you have any tips about that? Do you think they should push and like build the image and deploy it, even if like it costs you a bit of something? This is a great investment because you're going further into what you're building and then deploy it and like buy your own whatever like .com
Yeah.
you want, but just buy it. And because I feel like people are like very, they don't want to spend a dollar into these
Mm.
things, but they have so much value in terms of an investment perspective that you should put it's just like maybe $100, even though like Azure and AWS, they all have like services free until you reach a certain point.
Yeah.
So you'll be, but do you want to react to that maybe?
Yeah, I think I'm giving bad advice here because I'm just the other way around. If I have a project idea, I purchase the domain name first, then I do anything with that.
I'm very domain oriented. I always think about
but like yeah, I would always go for, you know, like even if it just costs you a lot, some bucks, like, you know, just getting something, you know, up and running so people can interact with that. I would always, you know, pay a little bit, you know, for that, just to show that it's actually working. And you know, as I said, it can be like a Docker image which is like deployed to some cloud service, which like probably doesn't cost you anything, but it also can be something like, you know, maybe you used a service for, you know, creating a model, and you just let, you know, this service run for a couple of hours per day, or maybe for a full day. I don't know. We're just spending that money on that if you think it's valuable for you, right? Why not do it? So yeah, probably wouldn't like recommend, like, you know, having your AutoML model running 24/7 for a whole month and just paying like 200 euros
on GPU.
Each. Yeah, and a GPU, you know,
GPU.
just for fun. I wouldn't recommend that. But
retraining
like,
dogs in cats detection 24/7.
But yeah, you should be able to invest, you know, at least a certain amount of money which you would otherwise spend on a coffee, you know, just on these things to, you know, just. And it also, like, honestly, it feels so much better if you have something that is actually working, and you can just, you know, pull up your phone and just say, "Hey, that's what I built," right? And it's much easier and much, like, you know, much cooler, instead of just pointing people to, oh, okay, there's a GitHub repo, and if you want, you can deploy that by yourself, right? Because people will never do that, you know. At least not the people who are going to hire you, right? Like your peers will do that, but the people who are going to hire you, they probably won't do that. So
Right, record your safe when it's live, or like build a blog with screenshots. Or I really liked, I saw a repo trending about Gen AI, and it's like a simulation where characters interact with each other, and you can build
that was cool.
I don't have the name, but amazing project, amazing. And there are so many great things. But anyway, two last questions, and I thank you a lot, Tobias, for this episode. Where can people learn more about you, about your work, about your books, and about your posts, daily posts, weekly posts?
Yeah, sure. So I post daily on Twitter and LinkedIn, so you can follow me there. I'm also writing a newsletter, AI4BI.rocks, where the 4 is written as the digit 4, so AI digit 4 BI.rocks. So I'm publishing that weekly newsletter. And otherwise, you can just read my book, AI-Powered Business Intelligence, published by O'Reilly. Just find it in every bookstore or on Amazon or any other ebook platform. So yeah, these are things to reach out.
Awesome. I'll put all the links in the description. And last question, do you have a message for the Let's Talk AI community? It can be personal, professional, it can be anything.
I would say, you know, maybe if even contradicts the name, don't talk about AI, just use AI, right? That's the message I would give. Talking about AI, or let's put it this way, like, talking about AI is great, but like doing stuff with AI is even better. So that would be my final words.
I love it. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day. I had an amazing time. Sorry, and I look forward to speak with you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward as well. Thank you.
Ciao.